Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar for today. RASopathies Network is hosting a discussion and a Q&A about the new Cure ID platform, which is hosting a RASopathies survey. And so we're going to find out the ins and outs of that and ask the sort of who, what, and why questions. So I'd like to introduce our guests for today. Let's start off with Shira Strongin.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited and happy to be here. I am from NCATS, which is the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences at NIH. I'm a fellow over there. I've been part of Cure ID for, oh my gosh, it'll be 6 years in November, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's a joint project between the FDA and NIH. So I used to be over at FDA when Heather Stone, who was also on here, was my supervisor, and switched over to the NCATS side. I really led the efforts with the RASopathy survey, so I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the background of Cure ID specifically, and also how to access the survey and how it can be used. And I can pop it over, I guess, to Samantha.
Oh, there we go. Hey, everybody. My name is Samantha Spires. I'm from a small town called Mer Rouge, Louisiana. I'm a parent of a RASopathy child. My daughter Amelia was born with RIT1 Noonan syndrome. She actually took trametinib for about 2.5 years and has just had a wonderful outcome. And I was also able to help contribute to create this survey. So I'm just a parent advocate here, and I'm glad to be here.
Honey, how about you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Honey Sayler, and my husband John and I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We have 3 beautiful children, and our last child was born with a RAF1 mutation and severe hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And I'm just here to help advocate to parents to let them know that their word is so powerful and speaking up.
Lisa?
I'm Lisa Scheuer. I am the founder of the RASopathies Network, and now I am board secretary. Had a child with Costello syndrome who died of cancer related to the RASopathies.
And my name is Beth Stronach. I'm the new president of RASopathies Network. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have a son that has Noonan syndrome. So I think to get started, I'd like to present just a few slides so that we can sort of have a perspective or a background on what we're going to be talking about with this particular application and this survey that's come out. So I think you can see this. This is the pathway that we often show, and overlaid on this cellular pathway, we have the different RASopathy syndromes. So some of you may be able to identify the syndrome that your family has been dealing with, and the genes that are or the gene mutations that are associated with those syndromes. And what's been really interesting over the years that these have now been described is that all these syndromes share some traits or some symptoms that are similar. And so they seem to sort of cluster clinically. But then what's interesting is when you look at what genes are affected that cause these syndromes, it turns out that they're all falling on this particular signaling pathway. And so that was a really big discovery by the scientists and the doctors who started to look at all these different genes. And so the idea would be that if these syndromes are caused by the dysfunctional activity or aberrant activity of these genes or these proteins on this pathway, if we could somehow regulate or normalize that pathway again, then maybe that would actually turn out to be a treatment. And that's kind of the basis for some of the drugs that have been that have started to be used off-label in some of these cases. And I want to follow up with this slide just to show that we know that RASopathies have a little bit of an increase. If this little triangle were to indicate activity of this signaling pathway, and the normal case would kind of be in the middle or be here in the light blue, we have a little bit of increased activity of this cellular signaling pathway, the RAS pathway, that causes RASopathy conditions. And that's in comparison to cancer, which has a really high, typically very severely increased amount of signaling, which causes cells to divide out of control and to cause cancer. So the idea with this figure is just to say, if we could use a treatment that would bring this level of signaling back down into the normal range, that could potentially be a therapy. And the other half of this slide, this panel, would essentially show, again, the types of genes or proteins on this pathway and the syndromes that are associated with them, but also highlight some of the drugs that have been used now in children off-label. One are the MEK inhibitors, which block the signaling at this step, and the other are the mTOR inhibitors, which would block signaling at this step. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it on now. We'll go back to Honey Sayler and hear about her story. But this just gives you, I think, a background to keep in mind, to think about what we can do to track our experience with these syndromes and with using these drugs. All right, Honey, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth and Lisa, for inviting me to share our daughter's story of hope. It's really powerful and special to us, so thank you so much. Today, I'll be speaking about our daughter, Grace. She turned 2 in July and was not expected to survive to her first birthday, so we've had quite a few wins in the last year. Grace was born with a RAF1 mutation and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and our journey, as many of you can relate to, has been nothing short of a whirlwind. Today, I'd like to share a bit of our story, beginning with her diagnosis at just 8 weeks old. It was during this time that we learned her hypertrophic cardiomyopathy had progressed from mild at birth to severe in a matter of weeks, while we were waiting for the results of her genetic testing. Our cardiologist explained there was no available treatment. Our cardiologist had said the only treatment was a beta blocker and that Grace had a 20 to 30% chance of meeting her first birthday. He heavily advised us against seeking further opinions, which I found very surprising, even turning down a referral to Seattle Children's when we begged and pleaded to be sent to a larger hospital. He insisted that all doctors shared the same data and there was simply no other options. Determined to help Grace, I compelled myself to start research. I threw myself into articles, looking up every medical term I didn't understand, scouring studies, rereading articles over and over. I encountered an honest but very disheartening statement from a different doctor. He told me, "Honey, there hasn't been any research on Noonan syndrome in the last 20 years. But as he said it, something clicked because I remembered reading something as mostly recently dated as 2019. After our hospital stay, I was overwhelmed with worry and the gravity of Grace's condition, but I refused to let it stop me. In my continued search, I found research by Dr. Andelfinger and Bruce Gelb. I found the case with the first 2 children who took trametinib. This was a moment of hope for our family. I emailed everything I could to our cardiologist and geneticist begging for help, a referral, or any information on the drug trametinib, but I didn't hear back or receive a response. Then a parent of a student I was teaching at the time, also a mother of a child with a rare disease, suggested I reach out to the RASopathy Network and the National Institute of Health. I did so immediately. I found any email I could, asking and begging how to get Grace into this case study and how to access trametinib. I couldn't believe it, but the next day, a doctor from the National Institute of Health called me back and asked me permission to give our information to Bruce Gelb. I was so honored. We began emailing back and forth with Dr. Gelb, sending her paperwork, sending her genetic test results, and he said that he thought she'd be a strong candidate for trametinib. In the following weeks, I contacted our local cardiologist repeatedly to advocate for this treatment. Although he initially resisted, citing he didn't know the side effects, I asked him one simple question: what side effect could be worse than death? He paused for a long time and agreed to finally submit this to insurance. but insurance denied us again and again and again. Refusing to accept this, I called daily, telling our story and citing research, even requesting a message be passed directly to the appeals department to call me back. I told Grace's story and let the insurance rep know I would call every single day until they approved it. After my persistence and a bit of pleading and persistence, insurance finally approved trametinib. Having a database to show our cardiologist would have been extremely helpful. Our first cardiologist was extremely wary of this treatment. I had to push very hard and to advocate very relentlessly to get him to approve it. I believe this would have helped our case had we had more positive data and patient success stories to show our cardiologist. Our daughter's hypertrophic cardiomyopathy was progressing so rapidly, we didn't have time to get him to agree with us, which was why I felt this survey would be so beneficial to other families when they're in a time crunch. Families handle stressors like this in different ways, and it's challenging caring for a sick child, going on a wild goose chase for answers, and standing up to medical professionals as a non-medical professional myself. Since beginning trametinib, we've switched cardiologists and found a perfect match for our family. Our new doctor is kind, patient, a great listener. He reads new research I bring him, and he willingly reaches out to Dr. Gelb after Grace's patient visits to double check dosages and protocols. He has made a world of difference in our lives. We held so much gratitude for Dr. Andelfinger, Dr. Gelb, Dr. Lorimer, our local cardiologist, and all of the professionals fighting this fight alongside of us. Grace has exceeded her first and second birthdays because of these great doctors. Her hypertrophic cardiomyopathy damage has stopped in its track and has not worsened even 1 millimeter since 14 weeks of age. Her pulmonary valve stenosis has cleared up. Her Z-scores are trending down. She shows no signs of clinical heart failure and is growing into a bad heart, so to speak. She is perfect and so very loved, and she has taught us a lifetime of lessons about never, ever, ever giving up. Our journey isn't over, but I'm incredibly grateful to have this opportunity to share this with you. I hope our experience can serve as a reminder of the power of advocacy, the importance of resilience, and the strength that comes from a community like this one. Thank you so much for letting me share Grace's story.
Thank you, honey. That was amazing. And I'm so glad to hear that she's a happy little girl. It's wonderful.
She is. We are so blessed.
So I think at this point, let's find out more of the details about this survey. So Shira, would you please let us know what this is all about?
Absolutely. And first of all, honey, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so encouraging to hear how wonderful your daughter is doing. And I'm so sorry that that experience that the first doctor was just so unfortunately such a common experience in the medical system. I forgot to mention this in my intro. I'm a rare disease patient myself. My life was saved by drug repurposing. Actually, one of the drugs that was a chemotherapeutic agent that saved my life is on the tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So I don't have RASopathies, but this is very close to my heart for a lot of these reasons. And so just hearing these reminds me of my own rare disease fighter mom. And thank you for everything that you do. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can show you a little bit about the background of CureID. So CureID, which is a platform to collect real-world data on drug repurposing, is a partner project between the FDA and NCATS at NIH. We have a website and a mobile app. Both of these are free to access, and they're meant to capture treatment experiences of healthcare providers, patients, caregivers, care partners, with repurposed drugs for diseases without adequate approved therapies. Initially, when this form was developed, it was meant only for infectious diseases and only for clinicians. And we have since expanded into these other areas of high unmet need, including rare genetic disorders, where the RASopathies is our pilot case. With this expansion, we decided that we needed to expand beyond just clinicians. We think that there are a lot of other healthcare providers, genetic counselors, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners who can enter just as good quality data. And also, from my personal experience as a rare disease patient, I know that nobody is better at advocating for ourselves than we are. And as Honey, you even mentioned in your story, you become an expert. You have to become a scientist, even if that's not your background. And so we think that the caregivers, care partners, and the patients themselves, when they're able to, particularly for our survey, you do need to be 18 and up to enter data. But if your child is able to support you and be there with you and entering the data, that is more than fine. But we think that this group of people is more than qualified to give us, quite honestly, more holistic, better data than even some of the healthcare providers can. And so the goal of CureID is to provide FDA, NIH, the clinical community, and patients with tool for surveillance of efficacy data. And with efficacy, not only how effective the drug is, but any adverse events that are kind of coming up as a part of it that this community might be experiencing different than the reported adverse events that the drug was approved for, to generate hypotheses and ideally inform clinical trials in disease spaces where clinical trials can happen. Why is CureID necessary? I mean, I think Honey just spoke to that beautifully, so you're making my job a little bit easier here. But drugs are not really being developed for rare and neglected diseases. On average, it takes about 10 to 15 years and hundreds of millions of dollars for novel drug development. And when you have a rare disease population, particularly a population like RASopathies, which as a whole are rare, and in individual syndromes are even rarer, you're not going to have the financial return of investment to do that. And honestly, you don't have the time when you have dying children who need treatments now. There still are insufficient incentives for researching these existing drug uses, unfortunately, because again, from a financial incentive standpoint, they might not be lucrative, but that doesn't mean that they aren't being used. 95% of rare disease patients are reliant on off-purpose drugs. And so we need this way to systematically capture the data and to be able to drive signal identification and hypothesis generation from that. So what do we offer? We offer a way for you to rapidly share your treatment experiences with the clinical and patient community. This is a global effort, so you do not have to be from the United States to be able to participate in this study. We collect data in a manner that can be immediately aggregated, and I'll show you what that looks like on our site when I show that in a little bit. And it's entirely open access and free for all. We do internally review the cases before publishing them on the website. This is mostly just to make sure that all of the questions are answered accurately and filled out. This is also to make sure that there's no intentionally harmful false information being shared. But we have not really had experiences with that at this point. And so some of the features, you can explore any of the case reports. We actually have an event site, so we put this up as one of our upcoming events there too, but you as participants can include your own events, publications, discussions, clinical trials. You can contribute by sharing your case reports and also participate in discussion posts, and you can stay updated. And so this is an old graphic, but this is what we had available. So it talks about the newsfeed customized to your interest. What you can do is select disease favorites so that the only notifications that you get are of your disease of interest. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this time to switch over to the CureID survey and show you guys a little bit of what exactly the website is like. So is everyone able to still see my screen and now showing the CureID website?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So there are a few different ways that you could get to create your case report form, which I will show you. But first, I'll give you a little bit of overview on how to navigate the website. So this is our homepage. You can go straight to here to share or explore data, or go to create, which is where we'll go in a minute. But you can select your category to begin with. You can see we have infectious diseases. We're doing a big long COVID push right now, which I'm actually going to click on so I can show you the aggregated data that we're talking about. So we'll look at the Explore treatment data, long COVID, and see we have about 529 case reports in there. And this is what it looks like. So you can see the top 10 frequently reported cases by drugs. You can also filter by symptoms, which will be available for the RASopathies as well. You can filter by drug. So if you're specifically interested in a specific drug, not just MEK inhibitors in general, but specifically trametinib, you can look that up here. We can filter by outcome. We can filter by demographics, by report type, if it's a published case report that we have uploaded and extracted into our database, or if it's a patient versus clinician submitted one. I don't think we're going to be doing electronic healthcare record extraction for the RASopathies. It's a little bit more complicated in these kind of ultra rare diseases. Duration of symptoms, these are for, again, long COVID specific, but all of these filters are available for you with RASopathies. And I accidentally clicked kidney disease. So you can see the top 10 frequently reported cases by drug. And when you go down here, then you'll be able to see the case reports, click on them to be able to get a more full picture of what the entire case report looks like. So the reason I'm showing this first is to show you the potential, because at this point we don't have RASopathies cases where I can show you this on. We have some from user testing that need to get put over into production, but I wanted to show you what the potential actually is where we have enough cases to do this kind of data aggregation. So now we'll go back to the homepage, and I find it easiest to create a case straight from help me find treatments help me find treatments for difficult to treat diseases, and clicking on share. So you would select the category to begin with. For RASopathies, it would be rare genetic disorders. Hit continue, and then select the disease you're reporting. We have a drop-down list of the RASopathies. If there is a type of RASopathy that you do not see on here, please email us so that we can get it included. We went off of the list from RASopathies Network, and that's how we determine this. But again, if there's something that you don't see on here, please feel free to let us know. So I'm just going to go ahead for the sake of showing you, click the first one, so CFC. I click continue, and it takes me to this specific CFC page. The really cool thing about this is if you are trying to promote this case report form, you are able to link directly to this page so that on social media, it only goes here to CFC. We're in the process of creating one that is specific for the RASopathies. That's a page like this that gives kind of background on the disorder, has an FAQ for healthcare providers and for patients and care partners. You can watch videos on how to submit the data, on what Cure ID is, kind of the things that I've gone over with you, but these will all be there for the whole of RASopathies. And then ready to begin. So this is where you'll be able to either create an account or sign in. The reason that we have you create an account is because we want you to be able to edit your form as needed, or provide updates. And so we recognize that you all are very busy parents, busy providers, patients have lives. We don't expect you to necessarily be able to fill this out in one setting. We have designed it in a way that can be done, but we have designed it also in a way where you can save and exit. And if you are going to save and exit and edit it at another time, you need to be able to log in. On the back end, we only see the cases as numbers. We don't see any of your personal information attached to your case. Individuals who are on our IRB are able to get that information if needed. So if you have a specific question about your case or you want to track that, we can then go in the back end, but that's only for the people that are on the IRB, not our entire team. No one publicly facing will be able to see your name. Even on the case report forms, it will just show as patient submitted report or clinician submitted report. It will not say Shira Strongin's report. So that's why we have you create the account. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. You can sign in through an email address. Also, something to know for that is I'm one of those people who I have a spam email address. This is not it. This is my regular email address. This can be sent there. You don't have to have an email address that has your full name. That's not the information we need. It's just a way for you to log in and update the case report as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and now I can get started. I'm going to put this in as a patient care case report form. The patient case report form and the care partner case report form are the exact same. The healthcare provider report form is a little bit different. All of the questions are the same. It's really some of the language that's different. That's meant to be there, but the forms are asking the same information. I also want to point out that this was, as Samantha mentioned, she's actually one of the patients or care partners who helped us to develop and create this form. And so this form was really, really designed with clinicians. We did actually work with Dr. Gelb, as well as Honey mentioned, Dr. Andelfinder, that all of these people have helped us create this form so that we know it would have utility for this community. Continue. This is our kind of general submitting cases to Cure ID, just in case you have questions, and then our informed consent. This is a research study. There's very minimal risks associated with this study, particularly because we're not asking you to do anything besides report on treatment that is already existing or ongoing. And we do have mechanisms to protect patient privacy, and we do not share any PII. So you can see here, you have to be above 18 to report the case, but the child that you are reporting on does not have to be above 18. Agree and go here. So the disease is already filled out. Continue. And then this is where you go into case characteristics. So all of these are optional. Basically everything in this case report form is optional except for the drug and the outcome, essentially. That's really what we need, but everything is optional. So how old is the patient? I don't know, prefer not to answer. All of these, I'm just going to pick my own age there. Was the patient born prematurely? If you click yes, that will help us kind of know a lot of the RASopathies patients do happen to be born prematurely, and it gives us more information into why the drug is or isn't working potentially, any side effects like that. What sex was the patient assigned at birth? And then we hit continue. And what country were they treated in? So again, this is international. Anybody can fill this out. However, in the United States, we ask more questions about race than other countries do, and other countries don't find it appropriate. So this question only comes up if you note that you are from the United States. Continue. And so this is the presentation, and this is probably the most important part of this form. So we've divided it up by system. So we have cardiac, we have immune, we have neuro, and these are kind of all of the symptoms that in coming up and talking with the expert clinicians and talking with our expert patient advocates, the primary presentations of these, particularly the ones that would be treated by a repurposed drug. If you do not see here, you can click other and then type it in there, and it will still pop up. So other, and I'm just going to say tachycardia, just so that we have that there. And you can see it's a very full list. I'm just selecting things so that we have examples to go through. We do have the cancers that often come with this disease here, audiologic, gemologic. Disease is not listed above so that you can talk about pain, because we know a lot of the kids experience chronic pain, and anything else that just was not specified here can be included there. So then you can click continue. And also, as you'll see, there's the save and exit. So at any time, if you want to save and exit and come back to your form, that's where you would go. Were there complications? If you click yes, then you'll be asked to identify what those complications were. And you can select multiple, continue. And again, this is all of these are optional. It's really the presentation and the drug and the outcome that we're looking for so that we can connect that. How is this diagnosed? Genetic sequencing, you have the option to select a gene here. We do recommend, a lot of people do not know this off the top of their head. A lot of people also do. If you know that you're going to sit down and fill this out, it can be helpful to have your child's medical case kind of available and some of the records so that you can fill this out a little bit easier. Continue. And then we ask about the specific gene changes. We give examples, nucleotide change, protein change. Again, this would be found on your sequencing report. If you do not know the answers, that is okay. It is not required. It is something that is helpful though. Continue. And this is where we go into the medications. So we do have a drop-down list. How do you spell trametinib? Because I am forgetting how to spell that, honey.
A-M.
Thank you.
E-T.
Thank you. There we go. Trametinib. And then I'm also, just so that we can see what it looks like when there are multiple drugs, I'm going to put in Zofran for nausea. And so see how I typed Zofran, the technical term is ondansetron, but it will still come up for you. One thing to note, I know a lot of the kids are on a lot of medications for symptom management like Zofran. This survey is specifically for drug repurposing. We would love any and all information that you can give us, including these kind of symptom management drugs where are not repurposed, such as Zofran, to treat nausea. But we also recognize that when your kids are on so many drugs, I can speak from my own experience. If I had to fill out every single drug that I have ever been on, that just simply wouldn't happen. I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's okay. We're really looking for what helped or hurt your child here. So for dosage, you have to come here and you click the edit button, and this will pop up. So saying, when did treatment begin? And so again, I'm just selecting random things here. 2020, is the patient still taking it? How long did they take it? If you didn't take it, if you aren't still taking it, so if you only took it for a year, you can put that there. And then we have initial versus current treatment because we recognize that doses change, and that's important for us to capture as well. So this asks about the initial dose that the patient took. Again, I'm typing in random numbers of this. How many times a day was it taken? 2 times a day. How was it given to the patient? And then if the dose changed, you hit yes, and then it pops up the same exact screen so that you can update the information for your current treatment or the final dose that your child ended on. I'm gonna hit no, continue. Did the patient have any side effects? Then you can pop it up. You can go through and click any of these that come up, nausea, etc. And if you type something that isn't in the list, you can always hit enter and then it will be included. And we ask here about what happened because of the side effects. So if nothing really happened, that's okay. The medication was stopped, or they experienced a non-serious event that didn't require any symptom management, so it was just continued, but it was noted. Those are all things that can be included here. Where was the patient treated? At home or at an outpatient clinic, in a hospital, in ICU. These are helpful for us to know, partially to gauge severity when we're doing analysis, and partially for other patients to just understand what to expect when they're taking this drug. And what was the primary reason the patient's doctor prescribed it? So we'll say the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and the patient improved. And what were the initial signs or clinical markers of improvement? So this is free text, so you can say child that lab work improved, or they had more energy, and you just type whatever is accurate to you. And then we ask if it impacted any of the patient's other symptoms, because what we found from talking to all of you is that a lot of patients are experiencing unexpected benefits and adverse events from taking these drugs, such as GI improvements. So then you go add other effect, what symptoms, and these will be from the symptoms that you already selected before. And you'll just be asked the same exact questions there. And then you do have to, other effect data will not be added until you add the save other effect button, so that goes there, and you can add more than just one. So if it helped your tachycardia and it helped your nausea, you can add that all there. Continue. How long until effect was noticed? Again, as you were talking about, Honey, this is really, really beneficial for parents to understand and be able to ask, and even for clinicians to know, okay, this is how long we have to try this before needing to increase the dose or before decreasing the dose, or any of those kinds of impacts. And then is there anything important that you want to add? Some people that we've talked to have said that that there were adverse events and that the child had to stop taking it, but that it prevented their disease from progressing further, and so they would still recommend other people taking it. And this is that spot where you can share any of that kind of information. So I'll hit continue, and you see this popped up now. And Zofran, I'm just going to delete, but you would do the same thing with that for that as you just did. Continue. And we have our additional details. So would you like a reminder to update this form if your child is still on treatment? Sometimes it can be really helpful so that we can check in 6 months or a year. This is also why we have your email, so that it can auto go out to that. And we do have the option for you to select any images. So you can select the genetic sequencing. If you have the case report or the data from it, you can upload that image. We will remove all PII, so the name, anything like that will be removed. But if that's easier for you than trying to remember the specific nucleotide change and you want that data included, it can be uploaded in an image. Continue, and then the final review. So if all of this data looks good, then you submit it. I'm not going to submit it because this is a fake case, but what I will do is go to my account so that I can show you. I will save and exit so that you can see where it goes there. Save and exit. And so now I'm in my account. I have my submissions, and you can see this was a saved one. So if I want to update or edit it, I can do that here by clicking on these 3 buttons, edit or delete. And you can see my published case report form for one of my rare disorders. is right here under other diseases. And so this is what it looks like when it's been approved. And you can see the case ID number here. So that's all that we can see in the back end unless we are on the IRB and have been approved to see names and details like that. This is also where you can go to talk about your interests. So as you can see, I've put my interests as all of the RASopathies, but if you're also interested in long COVID, you could do that here and click any of these types of things. And then when it comes to notifications, this is my notifications to say that my disease was approved. And you can go to your settings so that you can see what diseases. So only the cases that I'm interested in, I want to receive. I don't want to receive push notifications at all. I want to receive notifications on discussion posts. All of that is fully in your control. So I think that was probably a lot of information, but hopefully it was helpful. I'll stop sharing my screen. I think there's going to be time for question and answer at the end. But maybe we want to give it over to Samantha since she was a part of developing this form as well.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for that. It looks like it's something that we'll have to go into and look at and experience ourselves before we really understand it, but it's got a lot of capability. So that's great. Samantha, would you like to tell us your story?
Yes, thank you all for having me. So, my daughter Amelia was born with Rit1 Noonan syndrome in August of 2019. At birth, she was born 37 weeks, 5 days. So a little bit premature, not too much. There was nothing. I had severe polyhydramnios, but other than that, nothing cardiac showed on any of my in utero scans. Like, she was born, to my knowledge, a very healthy baby. She had a slight murmur at birth that was all worked up. She had an ASD at birth, but nothing that doctors were extremely worried about at the time. We followed up in 6 weeks, and that's, like Honey had said, our hypertrophic cardiomyopathy had progressed very, very rapidly. They immediately shipped us to New Orleans, which was the closest heart failure and transplant program for this type of diagnosis. And thankfully, unlike Honey, I had extremely, extremely proactive doctors at the time. We received a clinical diagnosis basically upon arriving at the hospital. They did stat genetic testing, and at that time found that Amelia did have the RIT1 mutation. We our doctor had already pulled this study from Dr. Andelfinger, which to me is such just like a timing and blessing thing because it was published in May of that year. So to our knowledge, we were one of the first kids in the country to have started the trametinib alongside the two patients at the initial study. And like Honey had said at that time, you're just kind of grasping. I've never heard of Noonan syndrome before they told me my daughter had Noonan syndrome. As a parent, and I'm non-medical as well, you're just grasping at something. And for something with so much little data, there was nothing other than that study that I had to go off of. So I struggled at that time, just looking at the future, what to expect, what do we do? So they immediately, once we got and at the time, I will add that, thankfully my daughter was RIT1, and that's what these two, patient 0, patient 1 were. And there's been so much promise since then with this data, with people talking, realizing that other RASopathies will show promise with this drug. So they admitted us to the hospital. We started the trametinib inpatient, just on the regular pediatric floor. We were inpatient for 3 days just for side effect monitoring. Then they DC'd us home. We were still staying locally in the New Orleans area. And then we came back, and within 5 days, I think we'd seen stabilization of her HCM, which at that point was progressing rapidly. Over time, she did also have pulmonary valve stenosis, but I guess in comparison with the HCM, that was just kind of like, I'm not going to say on the back burner, but just wasn't our biggest hurdle at the time. So she stayed on the drug for about, I think in total, 3.5 years. We did, which is something that I think is really important. A part of this survey is, and something I haven't really seen with a lot of Noonan's kids, just in my communications with families and whatnot, is she had severe mitral valve regurgitation, which is something that's not a classic symptom of any cardiac Noonan syndrome. So she did have a mitral valve replacement in 2022, which is something that I feel like is worth adding on the survey for families that go through a similar thing. We stopped the drug for about 2 weeks during her surgery and then resumed. Then shortly after her surgery, her HCM had regressed so much. She was about 2.5 at the time. So she would have been on the drug, about 2.5 years. Her Z scores were almost perfect. Her echoes were perfect after she received the new valve. It's a miracle considering this child at 6 weeks old was worked up for heart transplant and now almost has a completely perfect echo. So my experience in helping with this survey is, we are one of the older children that have been on the drug that has had the most experience with it. We are completely weaned off. She's been off of the drug for about 1.5 years now. We've seen no changes in our echo, thank goodness. It's just that I've had, at this point, over the last 5 years, hundreds of families contact me just via the RASopathy Network Facebook page and different things, via email. And in my case may be different than somebody else's. So it's the Facebook groups are good, but it's so nice to have just definitive data right there in front of you that you can go off of, because it's such a scary thing, especially as a parent, but then too, if you do have these difficult physicians that you're working with, just say, here's the data, here you go, like this. Because it's like, when we first received our Noonan syndrome diagnosis, the main things that our geneticist and our cardiologist told us is there's no cookie cutter Noonan syndrome patient. This is a spectrum we're working with, everything is different. So this survey and this data is really going to help kids from here on out.
Yeah, that's amazing. Another awesome story. And yes, like you said, the timing is incredible. How did you first hear about, was it your doctor that suggested this medication?
Yes, it's so we were sent to New Orleans immediately. We live in North Louisiana, and so our closest children's hospital is about 5 hours away from where we live. By the time we had gotten there, the team had pretty much decided, all right, this child has Noonan syndrome. Let's do a stat genetic testing. And so actually our cardiology team had found this data. I don't know where. And our cardiologist at the time, which is Dr. Jay Climahan, he's no longer in New Orleans anymore. He's at Cohen's Children in New York, but he reached out to Andelfinger immediately and they said, yes, get this, let's get which at the time, you needed really the RIT1 diagnosis, which is no longer the case anymore, but they did a stat genetic testing. We had her exact sequence back within 7 days, and then we started 3 days later. So it was just boom, boom, boom. I'm very grateful, and it does make me sad in Honey's case that she did have to go through a delay for so long, because that was the most stressful week and a half of my life. So because like I'd said, Amelia's HCM was getting so worse so rapidly, so we were ready to list for heart transplant at that point, and it was so fast and just the craziest time of my life. So but yes, I'm very grateful for a very proactive team of doctors. Like I said, our cardiologist, Dr. Climahan, at the time, he was, we did have a little pushback from our insurance company, and so he did a peer-to-peer immediately, and it's like, look, a heart transplant is no less than $1 million, let's just try this drug. Like, if it doesn't work, then we'll go to plan B. But financially wise, this is the way to go, and if it works, like this data says it works, then, and it did, then so there may be some pushback from insurance, like Honey also went through as well. And, that might be something that people could note in the miscellaneous section, just different things, different hurdles that families are going to go through in this process.
So let me ask Shira then, how would this be able to be presented to, if a family were experiencing this as these moms did, to have to show something to their doctors and they didn't have the scientific publication, how would they be able to show this or present this to their doctors?
Absolutely. So as shown on the long COVID page, we have that aggregate data. And so our goal with the RASopathies before the aggregate data will start as soon as any cases roll in. So if there's 5 cases, there will be aggregate data. Our goal is that we'll have a minimum of 25 cases to start doing our own interim analysis. But that aggregate data can absolutely be shared to your clinicians, your any other providers that you're trying to talk to insurance even, because insurance is sometimes more willing to cover things if there is data out there on this being effective. You're able to print any patient case report. So again, it will just show as patient submitted, but you can print out all of this information and it will have the full details and bring that in. My mom actually used to do that to my doctor. She'd come in with like a little binder of here's all of the things.
Yep.
Here you go. It's what you have to do. And so we can be part of that binder for you. You can print out our data from the data aggregation that we show, and we can you can print out the patient case submitted reports. And also, frankly, because this is an FDA and NIH and joint initiative, sometimes even knowing that can be helpful for your clinicians of saying this data has been collected in a repository that was designed by FDA and NIH. Some doctors might feel a little bit more comfortable in trusting the data because of that.
Right.
This is something that we are actively
Yeah.
interested in at this level.
So this is compliant. It's
Yes.
standardized in terms of what you're collecting and de-identified, right?
Completely
So-
de-identified.
Yeah.
And again, our goal is hitting that kind of 25 so we can do our own interim analysis, but because the aggregate data will start showing as soon as cases come in, and because this is open source, you all can look at this at any point. It doesn't have to get to 25. It can get to 5 to 10 to 15 cases. And also, there is no end date to this survey. I know that had been some of the confusion when we were initially trying to promote this, in part because of us requiring a login. I think that people thought they had to be given a login, but that's not it at all. As I explained earlier, it's to make it easier on you to edit and update your cases. But this is available. This is not going anywhere. This tool is out there available. The data will be available for you. It is open source. It is public. So you can access this at any time. You can submit your case at any time. Obviously, the sooner the better so that we can start doing this analysis. But this is if there are patients in 2 years who want to submit their cases, they will be able to do that. The goal is to create a comprehensive repository. It's not just to capture people within a certain period of time.
And what happens if a person has entered their data into more than one database? Because I know that there are several surveys and registries and that kind of thing. Or as an add-on to that, does a doctor and a patient, if they both put in a case report, how do you reconcile that?
So we are in the process of trying to use these kind of like universal identifiers on the back end so that if you put in that number, again, it still is de-identified, it's just that number. And then the clinician would also be able to put in that number so we'd be able to tell. I will say it's happened very, very rarely because clinicians oftentimes do not have the time or quite frankly, the drive that you all do to put in data. So we're not really expecting clinicians to put in much, even though it is there as an option. But it's we review and check all of these, and so we can see if they're similar and not even similar, the same, because all of the information would be identical down to the starting date, the dosages, anything else, the adverse events, all of those would be exactly the same and we would be able to tell. So that's also partially why we review things. As far as other databases, to my knowledge, you guys would be more knowledgeable about this, we're the only ones that are collecting data specifically on drug repurposing, and those are our questions. So if you've submitted data to others on just general experience as a RASopathies patient or care partner, you would have to resubmit some of your data because we do ask some of the questions about, diagnosis and mutation type. But as far as the drug repurposing questions specifically, those are unique to us. We are collaborating with NCI and the RASopathies natural history study there. And so they will be including these questions. That being said, they're going to be included for new patients and we'll be able to get that data from them. So if you've already participated in that study, you were not asked these questions and you would have to enter it here to be included.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Do you guys have any additional questions?
Hi, this is Pilar Magoulis. Thank you
Hi,
so much
Pilar.
for this webinar. So I'm a genetic counselor at Baylor. and Texas Children's Hospital, and then also serve on the RASopathies Scientific Advisory Council and the board for CFC International. And so I'm really excited. So we have three. First, also thank you to the families for sharing their stories. They were incredible, and I'm always impressed by how strong just to advocate for your child, and the fact that you shouldn't have to advocate and fight that hard. But I do have three patients that we've treated over the years with trametinib, two who had Noonan, one who has CFC. And so with entering that data, so I will want to enter that, I will enter that data, but two of the patients with Noonan had passed away sort of unrelated to the trametinib, and several months or after they had initiated treatment. And so is it okay to still include patients who are deceased? And I wasn't sure even
Absolutely.
in looking at the like current age, but is there a deceased option, or is it age they
Yes.
started, or okay.
Yes. And so there is a little option for loss of life, as not a side effect, but how is the patient doing now? And these are also details that you can include in that kind of miscellaneous information. So you can say unrelated to the drug, patient passed away due to complication. However you feel comfortable phrasing that, that is possible. And we are looking for data from patients who are alive and still with us and patients who have passed away. We're looking for, and even if the reason that they passed away is not related to the repurposed drug, so trametinib as the example, but we will accept any and all data.
Okay. And as a genetic counselor, I can, try to review the charts as best I can, but there are, I think, limitations to my even like just ability to recognize, is this a side effect like related to the drug or related to the underlying disease, or other drugs like that these kids are, like the ones at least that we treated, were critically ill. And so how are you going to try to tease out some of those things to see whether it's drug related, disease related, other drug related, in looking at aggregate data as you get more patients submitted?
Yeah, so the aggregate data is really the key part with this, because if we're seeing a trend or patterns of these specific drugs constantly have these kinds of side effects or this constellation, so if you're on trametinib and then these other two drugs and consistently that 3-drug combination is causing these weird adverse events, that's a signal to us. As far as, sorry, what was your other question again?
It was mostly that, but I think just the
Okay.
level of detail I don't know
Yes.
how much I'll be able to extract or
Mhm.
attribute to the drug, I guess.
And I think that that's something that that's why we have that miscellaneous, and you can put that there and saying, this is my assumption. I can't guarantee this, but that's for us in aggregate data. If we're seeing the responses that you mentioned happening more frequently in other patients, that's something for us that is a signal still, even if it can't be confirmed by you, because I don't expect it to be confirmed by you based off of only 3 patients realistically.
Okay. And then, sorry, my last question is,
Yeah.
so is this specifically for non-NF1 RASopathies, or are you interested also in NF1? And then the other kind of part of that was, we have like a vascular anomalies clinic where they treat lymphatic abnormalities with like RASO1. Are you interested in those patients too, or more of like the germline RASopathy kind of CFC Noonan Costello?
So I would say right now, when we designed this form, it was more in mind for the germline. However, I believe that our form could be used for these other cases. And so we'd be happy to collect data, because I think that that's, at the end of the day, the most useful piece of this tool is the collection and sharing of this data. We do have NF1 there, and we are accepting NF1 cases. We have not been promoting as much in that space because there are some more available approved treatment options for NF1, and the main repurposing is happening in these kinds of other communities. That being said, we are not going to turn away cases of drug repurposing, whether it's NF1 or not. And particularly, even if you're using a drug that was approved in NF1 in a patient with CFC or Noonan, that is still of interest to us, because that still is repurposing and something that we need to be able to capture and systematically analyze.
And I did see that there was a place to input if you have CM-AVM,
Yes.
Okay.
or
Great.
that was down in the pull down menu. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
So I wanted to confirm that this is about repurposed drugs, not drugs that were, like, for example, the chemotherapy my son had for rhabdo was not repurposed. It was just their usual. So that wouldn't be included. So therefore, I don't have anything to report.
Yes. And so we're really looking for drug repurposing. That being said, it doesn't need to be these kind of the big life-saving, the chemotherapies, the MEK inhibitors. We're still looking for treatment management. So there's, in long COVID as an example, a lot of people have been using SSRIs for pain and not for depression. And so those are things, even if your child has been on drugs like that, that still is something to report. It's not just the repurposing of the big life-saving drugs, it's also the purposing of the life-changing drugs based off of symptom management.
I noticed that NAC was on the list for long COVID, and that has been something that has been discussed with families that they're going to try and stuff. So that would be an example of that
Yep.
that we would like to engage and collect. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really, when we're talking about things that I wouldn't say not interested, but less interested, is that classic, your child was on Zofran because they were nauseous. That is one-to-one. That is exactly what that drug is for. We expect that. If there was something where it's, even if it is, we know that SSRIs can help with pain. That isn't new information for us. But we still want to be able to collect that systematically, because that might present differently in different populations, depending on your disease mechanisms and pathways.
Yeah, and I think it would be useful if parents have experienced drug interactions that are negative. And I think, Honey, you've had
Absolutely.
that experience as well. So to be able to put that in would certainly be new information with these drugs.
Absolutely. And one other thing I want to mention, I know that we're coming to a close. Heather had put this detail in there already. If you would like help entering your case reports, if anyone needs that kind of assistance, you can email curesupport@nih.gov, and one of our team members will be able to help assist you with this, whether through a Zoom call, a phone call, whatever that looks like. We are also constantly in the process of updating our site and trying to make it more accessible for users. And so we are going to be conducting user testing again soon. And if that's something that you're interested in, please email us so that we can get you on that list. It's also a way that you can enter your case with us there too. So similar, you get the help and assistance, but then we also get the help because you give us feedback on our website and what we can do better too. And yes, international is welcome. This is global. So I will drop my personal, my work email in the chat for you all to have as well. And then you have the Cure Support at NIH as well that you can email with any questions, any comments, any concerns. If you're interested in signing up for user testing, please let us know. And thank you so much to Beth and Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you just say the NCATS, the website for Cure ID? It's pretty simple, but
Yes, it is.
Putting it in the chat.
Cure.ncats.io, and I will put that in the chat. Or Heather is on top of it. She already put it in the chat, so that's where you go to visit this. And then the app is free in the App Store and Google Play. Cure ID. Yes, Heather, put that in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can use it on your browser or your desktop. You don't need to necessarily download the app, right?
No, you don't. The case I just took you guys through, I did it on my browser. I personally find it easier to do on the browser because I find it easier. But if you find it easier on your phone, then we have the app too.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for this really informative webinar. Thank you very much to our families that have contributed their amazing stories, and the importance of using this type of survey to collect this data so that it can be aggregated and used to have a really positive impact in the future. And that's what we want to see. We want to see these potential treatments come to the people that need them and have an impact and improve your lives. So with that, if there are no other questions, then we'll let everybody get back to their afternoons.
Thank you so much for hosting this.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.